Hi, I'm Marie Hopkinson. Welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. And on today's episode, as part of our series of talking about the 5-element personality types, which type are you? Might be the question that you want to ask. So today we're talking about the water type. And I thought we would start this video with talking about the different emotional, mental aspects of the water type. We'll talk about some of the physiological types. We'll talk about what happens when the water type gets into detriment, what kind of symptoms or situations would they face more commonly. And why would you want to know all this stuff? Well, maybe you're just curious. That's fine, you can be curious. Maybe you're studying Chinese medicine, or perhaps you are also a patient of Chinese medicine, or you're just a curious person, a scholar of Chinese medicine, if you like, and you're wanting to know more about how could you be healthier in Chinese medicine. Well, understanding what type you are helps you understand why do you do the things that you do. Now, this is very similar to, like, let's say, personality types like the Myers-Briggs personality types, where if you understand and you know who you are, you can kind of expect, well, this is what comes with the territory of being that type. So in Chinese medicine, there's 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And each of these has a particular type. So it's a lot more simplistic, let's say, than Myers-Briggs, where it's much more kind of, detailed, where I think you have 16 or something personality types within that. So let's get into it and talk about the water type. So a water type person is typically articulate, known as a clever kind of person, and very introspective kind of person. So they like their own space, they like their own time, and they like to kind of have that ability to think and be on their own, and they don't mind their own company. So you can obviously think of one of the downsides of this type might be that they might experience loneliness, or they might experience a bit of disconnection from the outside world because of that ability to spend long periods of time by themselves and feel good about that. That means that there's less time, I guess, in life for connection with other people. And so they might then wake up one day and think, oh, I'm a bit lonely, I'm a bit isolated. And that could be the detriment of this type. Also, that links into another aspect of the water type, tend to be very self-sufficient and self-containing types of people. So they won't reach out and ask for help as much as other types. They'll tend to be able to get things done, and they'll figure out a way. And that's part of that intellect and that cleverness about this type of person. They like to kind of find the way and find it themselves. So they generally seek knowledge and understanding, right? They seek to find the way, they seek to find the truth, they seek to find and there's a bit of a curiosity and an openness in that way as well. But they also, as a type, they tend to be a bit more introverted. So on the Myers-Briggs, these would be the I types. Most of the time. They tend to be like their own space, they like to hide in their own self. They don't want to put themselves out there as extrovertedly as other types. Like a bit of an enigma, right? So they wouldn't mind being, the wise person on a hill that people seek to find the wisdom. And they don't necessarily have to kind of be they don't want everything about them known, I guess, to the outside world, I don't think. They like the anonymity, right? So they're probably a bit more concerned about the big brother watching them. Maybe conspiracy theorists kind of people could be in this group as well. But they value that anonymity. They value that, and they wouldn't like their privacy kind of being infringed upon, let's say. So typical problems that the water type of people can have is that, what I said before, that loneliness or that isolation that they can feel because of the type of personality, meaning that if you don't have to reach out and ask for help as often, then you're just not in contact with that as many more people as you maybe could be, or and that can be part of forming a relationship, like a love relationship with people as well, as if you're not needing to make yourself vulnerable to somebody else. And then that can possibly lead to that isolation, that loneliness. Can be a bit suspicious. Can be a bit, it just reminds me of that song, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious. Can kind of be a bit suspicious. They don't just take things as presented, right? They want to kind of know, because of that curiosity and that knowledge seeking, they want to know the truth and find that out for themselves, and not necessarily be just spoon-fed and take what's given to them on a platter. So there could be a little bit unforgiving, right? A bit ruthless kind of a person, and that can also be why they can experience that isolation in relationships and maybe just difficulty forming, relationships. But the good side of not the good side, but the other side of that is that they can be a very loyal kind of person in that. When they do find people that they connect with, they can be very loyal types of people. Typical problems can be in a physiological sense, could be hardening of the arteries, deterioration of your teeth and gums, backache, chilliness, and loss of libido. Now, these are all things that are related to the water element linked to the kidneys in Chinese medicine. So your kidneys are housed in the lower back. They're in your lower back area. So typically TCM kind of associates this lower backache that's kind of brought on by overwork, which is pretty much just bending and sweeping. And in the olden days, before you had cleaning devices that you have now, you'd have to bend over a lot to do a lot of cleaning stuff. And that overwork kind of meant not mental overwork, but physical overwork, kind of weakening the kidneys. And your libido is related to your kidney essence in TCM, so that's where they get that idea from. And there's other relationships there. So let's talk about the properties or the functions of the water element as a personality type. These people tend to have a good balance or utility of imagination and reflection. Right, so imagination, like thinking, oh, what else could there be? That creativity and that imagining and that kind of stuff. But also reflecting on the past and thinking, well, that wasn't a good decision, or I wouldn't do that again. And so that's kind of two aspects. And you can think of that in water. Like water is a reflection, right? You see your reflection in the water. So that's one of the things about water. And water also has a fluidity to it. It's not a still static compound, right? And so people who are a water element people tend to have a good flow. They tend to have an ability to kind of, okay, these things come and these things go, and like an ability to kind of imagine a better day and imagine a better society. The previous video I was talking about metal, which was much more stoic, much more structured. And I didn't mention that, metal itself is a structure. It's not a flow like a water. It's, that structure and that stoic kind of thing. That's still that form. And so water element people tend to have that flow about them a little bit more. They tend to have good perception about, what's going on in the world. They tend to be alert to that perception around other people, and retaining information and retention of things, right? So the biological functions of the water element in Chinese medicine is to do with consolidation. And so part of this in a physiological sense would be the idea of your kidney essence being consolidated means it's not scattered, right? So I've used this example before when I talked about kidneys and Jing, or just the kidney functions, and it might have even been on a student-based video. So I'll mention this idea again. But so in Chinese medicine, kidney essence is the the powerhouse of your body, the core of your body, the plutonium of your body, if you like, right? The thing that's keeping you running. And you don't really need very much of it to keep everything running. And you can also parallel this to yang, right? Just to the yang of your body. And you could liken it to like 100 coins, right? So if I gave you $100, but I got it out of the bank in coins, and I gave you 100 coins, and I said, I'm going to come back next week, and I expect you to have 100 coins. Well, the way you keep hold of that $100 is you consolidate it. You keep it in a little bag, and you keep them all together. You don't just take that 100 coins and throw them into the house. And then next week you're like, where are those 100 coins? Like, where are they? I have to go here and look here and get them. And that's very discombobulating and very disconcerting to that situation. Like, where is my money? Where's my stuff? You could go and exchange it for one note, so it's consolidated. That's the idea of consolidation. So in a mental sense, like being able to gather all of this data and consolidate it into something constructive is part of the water element aspect. Retention, like keeping it, holding it in, right? So if the kidneys function or the water element function isn't working properly, people might have bladder leakage. So when they sneeze or cough or just maybe just have incontinence, right, that can be part of that, an inability of the water element to hold in, right, the things. Germination, right, so things starting from scratch might be a part of a water element thing. So it's people that can do startups, people that can get things going, get things off the ground, nurture that seedling, if you like, and see that growth from that sprout, that germination, right? And regeneration. So old things that have died, bringing those things to life, stirring up the fire that's needed to kind of get something to going, can be part of that thing. So regenerating, like your body, is part of repairing and restoring. And so this is a function of the water element that's generally fairly strong with water element type of archetypal people. So that's the psyche of what's the psyche of a water element type of person like? So these people tend to be very candid. They'll just say it how it is, because that's kind of the clear cut, the best way to kind of cut through the bull dust and get to the idea. They tend to be introspective people, so they'll have a lot of thoughts to themselves. They'll have a lot of time to think. They might be candid and say what they think or say what they mean, but they do actually think about what they think. If that makes sense. They spend time thinking about what they think, but then when you ask them, they will tell you what they think, rather than other types of people that will tell you something that they think you want to hear or something else. Tend to be modest, so they might have a lot of accomplishments or achievements, but they're not going to gloat and boast about those things as easily as other types. They tend to be watchful, so they might look and see and be a bit more moderate in their approach because they're watching and seeing what's happening. Again, that's part of that sort of gathering the data, that perception, so perceiving the world and seeing what's happening, that kind of stuff. They tend to be curious people. How does this work? What does this do? So you can see these things in kids actually as well, right? And I mean, all of us have different aspects of these elements. No one just only has this, and there's only one type that has it and the others don't have it. And sometimes maybe how we're brought up, I think I mentioned this in the previous video as well, maybe that changes us, or change, is it nature or nurture, I guess is the answer there, the question there. But that curiosity, right? That and sometimes that's shut down as kids, right? Like I've got this 2-year-old nephew, and everything he's asking, like, what is that? What is that? How does that work? What is that? Because that's what you're doing at that age. You're learning about life and what are these things and how do they work, and and that curious nature kind of as a kid for this water type doesn't ever really leave you. And so they might go into jobs where that's really a big part of it. Like, okay, I want to understand, how does this work? I want to cut things open and find out what's inside and see what's going on. Maybe they want to take their toys apart and see what's going on, because of that curious nature and that openness and kind of, yeah. They tend to be a bit ingenious, right? So people would say that about them. Wow, you're so ingenious. You've just come up with these ideas and these things. How did you do that? And possibly that's part of that self-reliance, right? So how do you have that self-reliance? Well, you have to have a bit of ingenuity. You have to kind of figure it out on your own and be at peace with that and be able to do that. Be a bit careful, a bit particular, these people, so they might have particular things. You see that sometimes in autism. I'm not saying that these people would be autistic, but that particularity is kind of part of this element, right, that you see very commonly in autism, where people are like, especially for kids that are like, oh, I can only eat green and red vegetables or green and red foods. I'm just very particular for some reason. I just like this particular thing. I like this, and they know what they like, and that's that particular thing. Tend to be a bit thrifty, a bit of a money saver, or maybe figure things out and work things out, maybe not throw things away and fix them up themselves, and be a bit more able to kind of save money and not a wasteful kind of person, I guess. Sensible, known as a sensible person, and a lucid kind of person. Now, in an exaggerated sense, so that's in a healthy sense, or just the natural sense of a water element type. In an exaggerated sense, is someone who could be seen as a bit blunt. So instead of being just saying it how it is, it might just not come out very well. They might not have a filter or have a way of articulating it that's not hurtful to that person. So they might come across as a little bit crass or blunt. They could be more withdrawn, right? Because they like spending a lot of time on their own and in their own space. They're happy with that. So it could seem like they're definitely not a party animal type of person, as in they're not getting their energy from hanging around with lots of other people. Might be a bit detached from the world. Might be accused of, like, in an excessive or an exaggerated sense, might be a bit too imaginative and not attached to reality, right? So you see this with some types, like maybe Elon Musk might be a type like this, who's a person that is very, I think Elon Musk is an INTJ type of person, Myers-Briggs personality, and this would probably fit with the water element type. There's other Myers-Briggs that would fit with this as well, but like what I'm getting at is Elon Musk's the kind of person who's thinking, right, how can I solve the world's problems? Let's go to Mars. Let's build massive energy solves for the world, right? And do these, solve the world with solar power. Or let's build, his electric cars and all the rest of the things that he's got in terms of his companies. So that they can seem eccentric, and that's the next one I wanted to sort of bring your attention to. They can be the nutty professor a little bit.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
Because they can seem, and it's not until maybe 2 or 3 years or maybe a lot longer later where the world goes, oh, now I see what you were doing. Oh, that makes sense. But at the start, they could be, ridiculed for that kind of thing, right? They could be they could be seen as suspicious, again, similar to the metal type, where a little bit like the conspiracy theory type of person. Like, I'm not going to just take what you say at face value. I need to know for myself. I kind of need to understand that, and so that suspicion, and I'm not just taking it how it is. Like, needing to know, like, for myself. Be seen as cynical, and they can be also accused or seen as being preoccupied, right? Because they're very happy in their own thoughts, happy in their own world, and so can be harder to engage with other people. So, if this was a person that you were dating or you were looking at, you live with this person, they might not seem as engaged in your life and in your things at the time of having a conversation. They might be taking all of that in, but they might not be giving you the same visual cues as other people to say, I'm participating in this conversation. They might seem distracted, and they might seem blunt, or they give you an answer that doesn't seem, they might have to work on those people skills a little bit more than other people, I would say, right? Okay, so what can these people have difficulty with? They can kind of have difficulty with being social, right? That kind of makes sense now that we've discussed all this, right? They can be a loner, have difficulty forming relationships and difficulty holding on to relationships and staying with those people. They can be very easily, because they're so easily happy in their own space and in their own world, they can be seen as an introvert, and that can become a detrimental thing for them in some ways. Now, none of these things are absolute detriments. They're just how people are. But in an extreme case, or let's say if you just left the water element person to themselves, this is what would possibly happen. They could be prone to maybe a bit of hypochondria, a bit of isolation, difficult with communication, difficult to communicate their ideas, especially if they're more on the eccentric side and on the imaginative side. And it could be very hard for them to convey those ideas and get those things across. Or maybe these are people that are inventors that never get their ideas off the ground, in an articulate way, or never make much money out of their ideas or their concepts, because they kind of lack the ability to convey and communicate that to the outside world. So they might need to partner with somebody else in a business sense to kind of get that thing happening, right? It can really struggle with confidence. Some people, because they're not very good at communicating and articulating, and possibly have received bad feedback from that over the years, and that can cause people to lose confidence and lose trust, that kind of thing. So what happens to a water element person if there isn't enough power of the water element to sustain it, to actually power it and empower the person to be who they really are? Well, that person could become very sarcastic. Instead of just saying it how it is and being candid, they could become sarcastic and cynical, even more. They could also become reluctant to speak, or lose their ability to speak up and speak out, and so they could just become they could find articulating their words very difficult. Instead of becoming modest, or instead of being a modest person, they might actually become like an anonymous person. They might not want to have that identity. And so they might want to do their accomplishments, but just not be associated with them in some way. So they might create this would be people in an extreme sense, someone who might believe in a conspiracy kind of thing, that the government or people are out to get them or something like that. And you can see this in some kinds of mental illness, but you can also see this in people who just tend to be a little bit different, and they're not necessarily mentally ill, but they just become very anonymous, but they're still putting their ideas out there somehow, but they're not putting their face to it or their name to it, let's say. So they can also become a bit of a negative sort of person. A water element person can become pessimistic, become really critical. That's part of that sarcastic, get a negative slant on those things that would be possibly objective, right, in a healthy sense, but in an unhealthy sense, it can be they can dismiss everything because you can't trust anything, and you can't trust what anyone says, and so everything is negative, and it's always the negative side of things. And that can result in just living in a place of misery, not feeling happy with yourself and not feeling good about yourself. Another aspect of the sort of the curiosity and the ingenuity or the genius of these people can be that they could become a bit fanciful. So could be no reality, or very hard to see that link between reality. Now this is being a little bit critical here, because some things where you need people to kind of stretch things, as far as they can in order to make the changes that we see in the world. And these types of people tend to be the change makers of these big changes, right? They tend to be things that people that will be willing to think a bit bigger, be willing to do something. So in a healthy sense, they can be that. But in an unhealthy sense, they might be sort of like a bit of a nutter living on an island by themselves, or living in a remote place by themselves, living in their fantasy, and being very distrustful of the rest of the world, and that kind of thing would be an extreme of a lack of the power of the water that this person needs. They could become a little bit absent-minded as well. That might not be such a bad thing considering the other negative things that I've said, but just off in their dream world a little bit more, and less able to kind of think clearly and articulate and make sense of what they're thinking, right? So in a physical sense, the water element types of people tend to be have a fairly strong physical body. They tend to have a fairly dense physical body, and I won't go into this too much detail. So the general power of a water element person tends to come from their ability to conceive, concentrate, and conserve, right? So that consolidation, so to think up the ideas, to conserve the energy, and to actually do things in the long run, to be able to manage these things over long periods of time, because sometimes these projects or these ideas can be very big things, and to consolidate and to use the resources that's there. So Chinese medicine attributes your kidneys and your water element to holding the resource of your body, right? So this is kind of what it does. So the downside of the water element tends to be that bluntness, that can come off a little bit standoffish. The ability to withstand long periods of time alone and to be happy being alone can mean that people can feel a bit isolated or lonely if they're a water element type. and so might need to work on kind of people skills or plan time to be around other people to be able to get the benefit of those things, not necessarily for the now, but also for the long term when people look back on their life and they think, oh, I don't have many friends in my life, or I don't have people I can rely on or trust. And so also to be aware of that tendency of the water element to have that distrust, to think, oh, everyone's got an ulterior motive, or people, especially if you're a successful person in a water element, you might tend to think, oh, people only want to be my friend to be around my success or to get some kind of financial or other benefits from being around me. And then you might need those people around you because you need the aspects of relationship as well. And so, that might be something to consider. So I hope these videos have been useful and helpful to you. We're working our way through this series of the 5 elements and the different personality types of the 5 elements. So you can click the video below or above me, next to me, to get on to the next one. And I'll be making some more in the series too. If you've got a question about Chinese medicine, don't forget to pop it in the comments below. I love to answer people's questions, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next videos. Thanks for listening to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. Did you know we're also on TikTok? And you can find shorter videos on Facebook and Instagram that you might like to share with your friends and family. You can also find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all places where you listen to audio podcasts. I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon. Sip of water. I had to announce that. All right.